What if the next global financial crisis does not begin with a dramatic stock market crash, not with a sudden banking collapse, and not even with a cryptocurrency meltdown, but instead starts quietly with a metal that most people today barely notice? A metal that once defined wealth, shaped empires, and determined the fate of entire civilizations. When the dollar finally begins to fail under the weight of its own contradictions, silver will not simply rise in value. It will shock the world. And this outcome is not based on hope or hype. It is based on a repeating historical pattern that humanity has ignored again and again. The U.S. dollar is often described as the strongest currency in the world, but its real power does not come from strength. It comes from dependence. The global financial system is built around the dollar. Oil is priced in dollars. International trade is settled in dollars. Governments store their reserves in dollars. Global debt is denominated in dollars. Entire economies function under the assumption that the dollar will always work. This dependency creates the illusion of permanence, but history teaches us that no reserve currency, no matter how dominant, survives forever. Every reserve currency follows the same life cycle. It begins with trust and discipline. It expands through trade and influence. It grows powerful through debt, and eventually, it collapses under excess. Spain ruled the world through silver flowing from the Americas, yet debt and endless war destroyed its empire. Britain controlled global trade with the pound, but war costs and borrowing ended its dominance. The United States now stands at the same stage of the cycle, burdened by unprecedented debt, rising interest payments, and a financial system that requires constant money creation just to survive. The numbers behind the dollar reveal the fragility beneath the surface. Trillions of dollars are created digitally without physical backing. Government debt grows faster than the economy itself. Interest payments alone threaten to consume national budgets. Each crisis demands more money printing, and each rescue weakens confidence just a little more. The system continues not because it is healthy, but because stopping it would expose its weakness. This creates an illusion of stability that lasts only until confidence breaks. History shows us exactly what happens when confidence in money disappears. In ancient Rome, silver coins were once trusted because they contained real value. Over time, rulers diluted those coins with cheaper metals to fund spending. At first, the changes were subtle. People accepted the coins without question. Then prices rose, savings lost purchasing power, trust disappeared, and the economy collapsed. The Roman Empire did not fall because of invasion alone. It fell because its money failed first. The modern version of this story began in 1971 when the United States ended the gold standard. Overnight, the dollar became a pure fiat currency backed only by trust. What followed was one of the most dramatic monetary shifts in modern history. Inflation surged, purchasing power collapsed, and silver exploded in value, rising from roughly $1.50 to nearly $50 within a decade. Silver did not change. Human trust in paper money did. This is why silver behaves differently from almost every other asset. When confidence in currencies fades, investors do not immediately seek growth or speculation. They seek protection. They seek something tangible, limited, and real. Silver fulfills that role perfectly. It reacts faster than gold because its market is smaller, its price is lower, and sudden demand overwhelms supply. Silver does not move slowly. It reprices violently, often before the average person understands what is happening. Throughout history, silver has served as an early warning signal of monetary failure. It rises before panic becomes visible. It reacts before headlines change. It reflects fear long before governments admit problems exist. And today, the same conditions that existed before past currency failures are forming once again. The foundation is cracking, even if the surface still appears calm. Silver is widely misunderstood in the modern world because it is rarely explained for what it truly represents. Most people either see silver as a cheaper version of gold or dismiss it as an ordinary industrial metal. Both interpretations fail to capture its real significance. Silver exists at a rare intersection of money, industry, and trust, and this dual role makes it exceptionally sensitive during periods of monetary stress. For thousands of years, silver served as everyday money. It was not symbolic wealth reserved for elites, but practical currency used in trade, wages, and savings. Its value was not enforced by governments, but recognized by societies themselves. This historical role matters because it explains why silver still reacts to monetary instability today, even in a financial system dominated by digital balances and paper claims. Silver carries memory in a system designed to forget. Unlike gold, silver is not simply stored and preserved. It is consumed. Once silver enters industrial use, much of it is permanently lost. It becomes embedded in electronics, medical equipment, solar panels, electric vehicles, and defense technologies. As modern civilization becomes more technologically dependent, silver demand increases structurally. This demand is not optional. It is essential for systems to function. At the same time, silver supply struggles to respond. Mining output grows slowly, constrained by geology, cost, and time. Silver cannot be created digitally or expanded through policy decisions. It must be physically extracted, refined, and delivered. This creates a quiet but persistent imbalance, where demand rises steadily while available supply tightens in the background. This leads to a reality that surprises many investors. Despite common assumptions, there is less investable silver available above ground today than gold. Yet silver trades at a fraction of gold's price. Historically, the gold-to-silver ratio was far lower, often ranging between 10-1 and 20-1. The current ratio is not a reflection of natural value but the result of prolonged distortion. That distortion exists because silver is priced primarily through paper markets rather than physical exchange. Paper contracts represent multiples of the actual metal available. This structure functions only as long as participants are willing to settle in cash and do not demand delivery. During stable periods, this imbalance remains hidden. During periods of stress, it becomes impossible to ignore. When confidence in financial systems weakens, behavior changes. People begin to prefer possession over promises. At that point, the difference between price and availability becomes critical. In stable environments, price dominates decision-making. In unstable environments, access becomes more important than price. When this shift occurs, paper markets strain because they cannot create physical metal. The weakening of the dollar accelerates this transition. Currency failure rarely appears as sudden collapse. It manifests as erosion, declining purchasing power, expanding debt, and quiet loss of confidence. Central banks attempt to stabilize conditions through liquidity, but liquidity cannot restore trust indefinitely. Over time, foreign holders reduce exposure, trade mechanisms diversify, and monetary dominance weakens gradually rather than dramatically. As confidence in the dollar fades, capital searches for neutral anchors, assets that do not depend on policy decisions or political stability. Silver benefits disproportionately because its market is extremely small relative to global capital flows. Even modest reallocations overwhelm supply, causing sharp and sudden price movements. What appears to be volatility is often delayed adjustment. Years of price suppression amplify this effect. Silver prices have remained disconnected from fundamentals despite rising industrial demand and tightening supply. This builds pressure within the system. When suppression fails, adjustment is not smooth or orderly. It is abrupt. Markets reprice not based on valuation models, but on physical constraints. During this phase, traditional policy tools lose effectiveness. Interest rates cannot increase supply. Monetary stimulus cannot manufacture metal. Regulatory language cannot restore trust once physical shortages appear. This mismatch between financial control and physical reality defines the silver shock. As silver transitions from speculative asset to strategic resource, behavior across the system changes. Industrial users secure long-term supply. Investors shift focus from short-term price targets to long-term allocation. Preservation replaces speculation, reinforcing scarcity and accelerating repricing. Most observers misunderstand this phase, labeling it speculation or mania. They fail to recognize silver's movement as a signal of systemic stress. By the time the narrative adjusts, the market has already repriced. Silver does not predict collapse. It reflects pressure that already exists. In a weakening dollar environment, silver does not function as an alternative currency. It acts as a reference point, a reminder that value can exist outside promises, policy, and control. When systems recalibrate, silver provides continuity. This is not hype or speculation. It is structure asserting itself when trust erodes. At a certain point, Every financial system reaches a stage where it can no longer be stabilized through explanations, confidence, or temporary solutions. This moment does not arrive with a dramatic announcement or a clear signal. It arrives quietly, hidden inside routine policy decisions and normal-looking market behavior. On the surface, everything appears functional. Beneath it, trust begins to fade. When trust starts leaving a system, it rarely shows up in headlines. It shows up in behavior. People shorten their planning horizons. Institutions reduce long-term exposure. Capital becomes impatient. The focus shifts from growth to preservation. These changes are subtle at first, but they mark the true beginning of systemic transition. By the time governments acknowledge instability, behavior has already changed. History shows that currency failure is not defined by collapse alone, but by redistribution. Wealth does not disappear, it moves. Those holding promises are forced to adjust. Those holding tangible value adapt more smoothly. This process is uncomfortable because it exposes a truth modern systems prefer to ignore. Money itself is not wealth. Money is trust, and trust can be withdrawn. As the dollar weakens, the global response is uneven. Some countries move early, quietly reducing dependence and diversifying reserves. Others delay, hoping stability will return. Central banks begin repositioning not out of panic, but necessity. Trade agreements evolve. Settlement mechanisms change. Each adjustment seems minor in isolation, but together they signal a structural shift away from reliance on a single monetary anchor. In this environment, silver undergoes a critical transformation. It stops behaving like a speculative asset and begins functioning as a strategic resource. Industrial users no longer treat silver as a commodity that can always be sourced easily. They begin securing supply in advance. Investors shift their thinking from price movements to availability. The question changes from how much does silver cost to will silver be available at all? This is where shock emerges. The silver market is small relative to global capital and industrial demand. It cannot absorb sudden changes without consequences. When investment demand, industrial demand, and protective demand converge, the system strains. Price becomes secondary to access. Traditional valuation models lose relevance, replaced by scarcity-driven repricing. Governments struggle during this phase because their tools are designed for financial systems, not physical constraints. Interest rates cannot create metal. Liquidity injections cannot increase supply. Regulatory language cannot restore confidence once availability becomes uncertain. The mechanisms that stabilize paper assets fail when confronted with physical limits. This disconnect creates volatility not just in silver, but across markets. Assumptions about control begin to break down. Observers misinterpret these movements as speculation or irrational behavior, failing to recognize them as symptoms of systemic stress. This misunderstanding delays response and intensifies adjustment. By the time narratives change, the transition is already complete. What follows is not the end of economic activity, but its reorganization. Trade continues. Technology advances. Systems adapt. But the hierarchy of trust shifts. Physical assets regain importance. Tangible value reasserts itself. Silver does not replace currencies, nor does it become a dominant monetary system. Its role is quieter and more fundamental. Silver functions as a stabilizer during transition. It does not promise growth. It does not depend on policy credibility. It does not require belief. It simply exists. This is why silver has survived every monetary cycle in history. Not because it generates excitement, but because it provides continuity when systems recalibrate. After periods of monetary stress, societies tend to reflect. They question assumptions about endless debt. They reconsider the relationship between productivity and value. They re-examine the role of money itself. These reflections do not occur before adjustment, but after it. Silver's role is not to lead this process, but to endure it. The world does not end when the dollar weakens. Life continues. Markets function, but fragilities that were once hidden become visible. In that exposure, silver plays a quiet but decisive role. Not as salvation, not as speculation, but as evidence. Evidence that trust has shifted. Evidence that paper has limits. Evidence that history still applies. Silver does not shock the world through surprise. It shocks the world by reminding it of something it chose to forget.